Chapter 1.8 is a map with numerous flaws, which are magnified by its position in the campaign. The result is a level that falls well short of the high standard established by other chapters throughout Part 1, and seems to be disliked by many players. This is another route map, which of course is my least favorite type of objective. And as in 1.6.1, there are reinforcements that show up on later turns that can catch the player by surprise. In this case, they show up in the west and south of the map, areas the player might have already cleared of enemies and then abandoned. The big difference with 1.6.1 is that these reinforcements are undoubtedly intended to threaten the green units that the player is supposed to protect. And indeed, a savvy player might well anticipate the possibility of needing to protect the green units from ambush. As such, I find these reinforcements less objectionable than in 1.6.1. However, I think expecting reinforcements to try to ambush the green units would be much more natural on a defense map. Speaking of green units, this is the third consecutive chapter that has the player trying to save or protect them, and this is where I think 1.8 suffers for its position in the campaign. Side objectives are great, but repeating the same side objective over and over takes away the novelty and turns it into monotony. Compounding this problem is the fact that this is probably the least interesting green unit rescue of the three, at least for veteran players. It can be difficult initially to figure out how to save all of the green units, but if the player is willing to play the chapter quickly, the only deviation from routing the chapter normally they need to make in order to save all the green units is baiting the Wyvern in the southeast on turn 1. Veteran players are probably also less interested in this chapter due to the limited deployment options. All but 4 deployment slots have a locked character and location, including all of the slots for both of the outer groups. This dramatically limits the number of potential approaches that can be taken to the level on subsequent playthroughs. Much as many people have said that the Tower and Radiant Dawn shouldn't force characters like Soth and Soniki on repeat playthroughs, I think a similar loosening of constraints would have benefited this map. Another thing that players probably don't like about this map is the terrain. Limiting movement via desert, water, and other similar terrain often results in maps that annoy players. In this case, I actually think the swamp terrain is deceptively unimpactful. A player first encountering the map might think to go into the swamp to rescue the green units, and from experience I can confirm that this is an extremely painful way to play the level, but it's also entirely unnecessary. Saving the green units does not require outright rescuing any of them, and the player needs to send at most 1 unit into the swamp. From a traversal standpoint, this map can be seen much like a set of connected interior hallways or corridors. However, the reeds are another matter, as the player must cross them multiple times to reach the boss. Presumably this terrain was introduced to slow the player's rate of progress without making the map larger. Whatever the reason, it feels painfully slow to approach the boss. Moreover, a player that does not account for the possibility of reinforcements in areas of the map they've already cleared can be punished that much harder for moving their units away, and thus needing to cross the reeds again to reach the reinforcements. Interestingly, the Brigand class can cross reeds with lower penalties than normal foot units. In addition to catching me completely off guard in my playthrough, this suggests that the developers were trying to play up the ambush angle by making the Brigands effectively faster than they normally would be. As wrinkles go, this one is most interesting to me in the way that it underscores once again how poor the system's design choice to remove enemy ranges in hard mode was. I've had little bit criticism for this chapter thus far, but one thing it does very well is introduce Nyla. As with Volug in 1.5, this is a great map for taking advantage of Nyla's mobility. She is also, of course, capable of clearing the entire left side of the map by herself, which is particularly nice since only she and Volug can reach that area with any real speed. And Volug's help is welcome in clearing the path to the boss on the other side. After having to rely on a number of relatively fragile, underpowered characters throughout Part 1, it can definitely be fun to bulldoze enemies with Nyla here. Unfortunately, Raphael's introduction doesn't go nearly so well. His starting position is noticeably unhelpful, he has trouble keeping up with the party moving toward the boss due to his low movement and the lack of Canto units available to rescue drop him, and the restrictive terrain makes it very difficult to take advantage of his incredible 4-way chant. This is far and away the worst chapter in the game for Raphael, and seems like a terrible way to introduce the player to him specifically or to Herons in general. Overall, while I don't hate this chapter, I find a lot wrong with it, and I can certainly understand why people would dislike it. Its circumstances exacerbate the situation, but even taken in a vacuum, I think it competes with 161 for second worst chapter in Part 1. Depending on whether you prefer a more interesting concept with worse execution, or an uninspired concept with fewer flaws. Personally, I prefer the former, so I'd take 1.8 over 161.